So we're in Perek, Hilchot Shabbat, Perek Yod Daled, Halacha Kaf Aleph. Hazorek Daf Benach al Gabe Yetedot Birshut Harabim. Bena'asa Reshut Hayahid. Interesting permutation of the laws we studied in the previous class. If a person takes a board and he throws the board, he can be in the Shut Achid and he throws the board to the Shut Rabim. Alternatively, he's in the Shut Rabim and he's Ma'avil Dalid Amot. Birshut Rabim, he throws it more than Dalid Amot, and then it lands on these Yetedot. Not pillars, but little beams of wood, let's say. And now, and let's assume that these beams of wood are greater than 10 tefachim. So they have these beams of wood, have the dimensions of at least 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim, and they're 10 tefachim or greater. So now that you threw that board and it landed on top of the beams of wood, you created a shutei achid. Afilu haya keli al gabe hadaf patur shehare asiyat hamechisa im nihat keli. I want to revise what I said before. I said that the person was in the reshut. I said the person was in the Reshut Harabim. I want to correct that. It appears to me that the situation here is that the person throwing the board is actually in Reshut Hayahid. So he does Akira in the Reshut Hayahid. If he would have taken the board and just thrown it and it landed in the Reshut Harabim, that would have been Hayab, Mishum Hosa'a Reshut. But here, as it landed, it became the Reshut Hayahid. It became part of the Reshut Hayahid, right? And because of that, it's patur, because it's from Reshut Hayahid to Reshut Hayahid. Now it's true that it only becomes Reshut Hayahid once it lands, but it never landed on the Reshut Harabim, because at the moment it lands, it's already Reshut Hayahid. So that's why it's patur. Right? Let's even say a situation where a person has a board and on top of the board, let's say there's a screwdriver. So you take the board again, you throw it from the window of the Reshut Hayahid and it lands perfectly on those beams of wood. You would think, oh, well, now there's a screwdriver. So the halacha of the screwdriver is in Reshut Harabim, but no, because again, it's munach. When it lands on the Reshut Hayahid. It's a very interesting law. בור שהוא עמוק 10 ורחב 8 ברשות הרבים. So we have a pit in Reshut Harabim, which is 10 tefachim deep, which is the minimum depth for the Reshut Hayahid. V'rachav 8, and it's 8 tefachim wide. וזרק מחסלת ברשות הרבים, וחילקה הבור ברוחבו לשניים. פטור, שהרי עם הנחת הכלי, בטלו המחיסות. So this is a really interesting law. So again, you have this pit. Now this pit is obviously at a Reshut Hayahid because it's 10 tefachim deep, and it's 8 by 8, let's say. Now you need only 4 by 4, but this is actually 8 tefachim wide. Let's say, let me revise that. It's 8 tefachim wide and only needs to be 4 tefachim on the other side, right? So you took some sort of board. It's not really a board, it's a bamboo mat. You threw the bamboo mat and it landed in such a way so as to act as a divider, hence splitting this pit was originally 10 deep by 8 wide. And now somehow you threw the mat in and it landed vertically so as to create a mechisa, a partition. So now there's two bora, you now have two pits. And each pit is less than 4 tefachim because if the original side was exactly 8, this mahaselet goes down the middle, it has to be less than 4 on each side because the mahaselet, the bamboo mat, has some thickness to it. So if you do this, you're patur. She'areim hanahat hakeli batilu hamechisot ונעשה כל מקום מהן פטור פחות מ4 if you would have thrown the bamboo mat and it landed flat. So let's say you're in a shut harabim. Okay, situation. Let's be specific. Let's be clear. Person is in a shut harabim. He throws a mat into this hole, which is a reshut hayachid. Since at the moment it landed, the reshut hayachid is no longer there because the mat itself turned the reshut hayachid into a mekom patur because it's less than 4 tefachim wide. So therefore, it landed in a mekom patur, right? The original dimensions, which were 8 tefachim, are no longer there. Bor birshut harabim amok al sara v'rachab 4 malei mayim. You have this pit, again, Reshut Harabim. The pit is in Reshut Harabim. Again, it's 10 tefachim deep, so it can be Reshut Hayachid, V'rachav 4, and it's 4 tefachim wide, but it's filled with water. Interesting. It's filled with water. You threw something into the pit, and it landed on the water. Maybe you threw a toy boat and it landed on the water. Hayab. In this case, you're hayab. So that is. So what's the situation? The situation is he's in the Reshut Harabim and he throws this toy boat into the pit. Now, you would say, well, maybe the pit no longer has a depth of 10 tefachim. Why? It doesn't have a depth of 10 tefachim because there's water inside. And therefore, when he threw it if the pit had no water and you threw the toy boat from the Reshut Harabim into the Reshut Hayachid pit, then of course he'd be hayab. But here, because it's filled with water, you would say he's patur because the water makes it no longer like 10 tefachim. It fills it up, right? The answer is no, that is incorrect. The water is not considered to annul the dimensions of the pit. On the other hand, instead of a pit filled with water, the pit was filled with fruit, and now the dimensions of the pit are shrunk insofar as it used to be 10 tefachim deep, for example, and now it's not 10 tefachim deep. So it's no longer considered a reshut yahid. And therefore, it's patur, because you threw from the reshut harabim into a karmelit, right? And therefore, you're patur. Lekak ma'im shehu over b'reshut harabim. So let's say there's a puddle of water in the Reshut Harabim, in the public domain. And it's a puddle that does not impede the passage of the public, meaning people walk through the puddle. Obviously, they don't want to get their feet wet, but they have no choice. They can walk through it. If the puddle is less than 10 tefachim deep, that puddle is considered part of Reshut Harabim, meaning I'm not going to look at the puddle now and say, wait, it's 4 by 4 and let's say 5 tefachim deep. So therefore, it's a karmeli. No, you don't say that. Rather, it's considered a Reshut Harabim because people are walking through it. You understand? Even if it was a mot wide, 2 yards wide, still it's considered part of Reshut Harabim. Why? Because people are walking through it. בין שעולה ברוחבו 4 טפחים, שהרבע העם מדלגין עליו ואין מלכים בתוכו, הואיל ואין בעומקו 10. The reason is people can skip over it, they can hop over it, because it's less than 10 tefachim deep. So you can kind of like just kind of jump, gallop through the puddle. It's less than 10 tefachim deep, you can do that. And that's why it's considered Reshut Harabim. However, but if it's 10 tefachim deep, in that case, it's not Reshut Hayachid, right? Rather, it's a karmelit. It's a karmelit. Now, in the previous halakha, we said, bol b'reshut harabim amok 10 male mayim. We said that bol was a Reshut Hayachid. Right? Why was that bol Reshut Hayachid? Because that was a bol, that was an actual pit in the Reshut Harabim. Here there is no pit. It's a puddle and a regular sidewalk, an area sidewalk. It was probably dirty, muddy, ground back then. But there was no pit. Nobody dug a pit there. So if you dig a pit in Reshut Harabim, it's a Reshut Hayachid, if it has the right dimensions, right? And even if it's filled with water, it's a Reshut Hayachid, if it has the right dimensions. But here it's a puddle, and a puddle is different, right? So again, if the puddle is less than 10 tefachim deep, so that's something that people can kind of gallop over. It's a little uncomfortable. You can kind of go through it, right? And it doesn't matter how wide it is, even if it's wide, if it's a wide puddle. But if it's 10 tefachim deep, now it becomes like the ocean, or like a lake, like a river, and it's karmelit, right? And obviously, if you're going to say it's a karmelit because it's greater than 10 tefachim deep, 10 tefachim or greater, it has to be a minimum of 4 tefachim wide. So if you have a puddle, you have torrential rains, and now it's more than 10 tefachim deep, and it's 10 tefachim deep or more, or 4 tefachim wide and 4 tefachim wide or more, that becomes the karmelit. It's no longer the Reshut Harabim. שאין karmelit פחותה מ4.